theyeshiva.net.
We're going to start today a new mimer, but it's not really a new mimer, as I'll explain in a moment. Parshas Shlach in Likkutei Torah, Daf Lamed Zayin, Amud Beis, Lamed Zayin, column 2, or page 73. Vayomru el kol adas b'nei Yisrael leimer. Toiv haaretz moed moed. The previous mimer, Shlach Lecha Anoshim, that we learned in the last few days, is the first mimer of the Baal HaTanya on Parshas Shlach. The mimer was said in the year Tov Kuf Samach Zayin, 1807, in the secular calendar. Tov Kuf Samach Zayin in the Jewish calendar. Very often the Baal HaTanya would say a mimer, and in the next few days, or the next Shabbos, he would say what was called a beer, an explanation for the mimer. In that beer, he would take various ideas of the first mimer and develop them, elaborate on them, explain them more, sometimes, very often, explain the sources of the idea in Kabbalah and in Medrash and in various Sfarim. So often he would say a mimer, he would just bring ideas, but in the beer he would reference and cross-reference, and so to speak explain the methodology of how he got to this point, and what the sources are, whether it's in Zoyar or in Kisvei Harizal or in Sifrei Chkir or in Sifrei Rambam or whatever it is, and show the evolution of the ideas. In other words, the beer was basically going deeper into the concepts and into the source of the concepts. Sometimes the beer was said just for a few individuals, for a few private people, not for the whole Olam. Sometimes the beer was said in the middle of the week, so it was already a very select Olam. It wasn't the regular Olam. Sometimes the beer was said next Shabbos. Usually, when it says beer, there's a maim, and then right after that it says beer, and then it continues. The beer is usually longer than the first maim. Here, however, it has a new dibur amaschil. It starts off with a new pasuk, not the pasuk Shlach Lecha Anoshim, but really it's a beer. You could see immediately that it was a beer, an explanation that was said on this maim. So the concepts in this maimer are now elaborated in more detail and more depth in this maimer. So the truth is that when you read the maimer, it seems like a beer. It looks like a beer. But then years later, when a lot of new manuscripts started to come out, so one of the Hanachas, one of the people who wrote this Maimer, I told you the Alter Rebbe had different people who would write his Maimarim. The first was his brother. He had a brother, the Maharil, Rabbi Yehuda Leib, a younger brother, who would write all of his Maimarim. Most of the Maimarim of Torah and Likkutei Torah were written by his brother. The Alter Rebbe would speak in Yiddish. His brother would write the Maimarim in Lashon Kodesh. More or less, he tried to remain loyal to what his brother said. The next was his son, the Mittler Rebbe, Reb Dov Ber, would also write. Then there was another son, Reb Moshe, who would also write. Then his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, when he came of age, he also started to write. Besides that, there were Chassidim who would write. There was a Yidra Pinchas Roises who would also write. And sometimes other people. So sometimes you have Maimarim that were written by 5 different people. By his brother. Same Maimer. His brother wrote, his son wrote, another son wrote, Tzemach Tzedek wrote, and Reb Pinchas wrote. So you have the same Maimer in 5 versions, which is very fascinating. Because you could see they're all saying the same thing, but everybody's saying it differently. Alter Rebbe once said, as the Maharil, my brother, schreibt was ich sage. He writes what I say. He says, Beryl, my son, the Mittler Rebbe, Reb Dov Ber, schreibt was ich mein. He doesn't write what I say. He writes what I want to say, what I meant to say, what my thoughts are. He says, Mendel, the Tzemach Tzedek, his grandson, schreibt was ich sage und was ich mein. He writes what I said and what I mean. And then they had Reb Pinchas Roises. His thing was known that he was very medayik in Oisis Harav. He was extremely precise in writing exactly as the Alter Rebbe said it, exactly. To the point that there are times that he misses a line because the Alter Rebbe, in the middle of Chassidus, would often go into such a dveikus, he would go into such an ecstasy, very often. He would start rolling on the ground. And he was rolling on the ground, he would continue the mimer, literally rolling on the ground. And the Beis Medrash was made of concrete walls, cement walls, and he would bang his head hard, and he would start bleeding. So they cushioned all the walls in the Beis Medrash, so that when the Balatanya would roll, he wouldn't hurt himself. And they say that Pinchas Reizes used to roll after. Alter Rebbe said he shouldn't miss any words, especially when he was turning. So sometimes he'll literally skip a line, and you know that here there was a tremendous dveikus of the Alter Rebbe, and he pushed missed words because he was rolling, you couldn't hear things. So he was very medayik in Oisis Harav. So you have different the same maimah could be written by one person, two people, three people, four, especially the later years when there were more rioters because the Tzemach Tzedek grew older and there were more chassidim and so forth. Today they have Torah, Likkutei Torah, and today already is printed, just the last years they printed a whole set called Maimorei Admur Hazaken, the discourses of the Alter Rebbe, which is a red set. I think they have some of it upstairs, which is probably between 25 and 35 books, Svarim, over the years, all the years. So there you have the same Hanachas, which means the same Amarim written by other people. And they printed all versions, because every version always, there's something that you won't have in another version. So this Maimer here is in Likkutei Torah, but the Mittler Rebbe also wrote it. But in his headline, he put in beer. He put in that it was a beer, it's an explanation to before. So the suspicion is authenticated that Alter Rebbe said it as a beer. The same year, Tovkov, something probably a few days later. Nobody wrote in Yiddish. They always wrote in Lashon Kodesh.
Was the manuscript reviewed by Alter Rebbe?
So some manuscripts he reviewed, many he didn't. Some he reviewed and corrected, some he did, many he did not.
Who wrote this?
The Maharil. Most of Likkutei Torah and Torah was written by his brother, Rabbi Yehuda Leib, who would consistently, every Mitzvah Shabbos, Mitzvah Yom Tov, or middle of the week, he would always write the Maimonides. Shulchan Aruch Harav was written himself, word for word, and the Tanya also. The Tanya and Shulchan Aruch Harav were written word for word by the Alter Rebbe himself, and all of his letters and his Shal Setshuvos that he has. But the Maimarim mostly, besides there's a few things he wrote himself, most of them were written by others.
So what's happening now is this is what he said, and what you're giving over is what he meant?
Let's not push it. He said it about the Mittler Rebbe, not about me.
So what are you doing?
That's a good question. That I ask myself every day. The Likkutei Torah was printed Tov Reish Ches. Tov Reish Ches is 1848.
So did they find material afterwards?
Yeah, of course. That's what I'm saying. The last years, a tremendous amount of material was found. Tremendous amount.
Were not known at that time.
But what happened was the communists confiscated from the Lubavitcher Rebbe's most of their books and many of their manuscripts. The Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, had a library with all of the manuscripts of his father and grandfather and great-grandfather and great-grandfather from the Yerusha. But it was confiscated, and then it was confiscated. The communists confiscated from his son, the Rayatz. What happened was, after the war, after the Holocaust, things just remained confiscated. But in the later years, they started to allow things to get returned. So in the late 1970s, there was a huge treasure in Warsaw that came to New York, that came to the Rebbe, huge, and from that a tremendous amount was printed. And there were different stages that different manuscripts would come out from different situations, different people. Either, Sachrim, merchants, or business people who got it, or other family members, or it was just from a lot of different sources things came out. So then a lot more was published.
Still have stuff that wasn't.
I'm sure.
Still doing it?
I'm sure. A lot were also burnt in fires. Fires then were devastating, and a lot was burnt. More than half of Shulchan Aruch Harav is extinct from a fire. All the original manuscripts of Tanya were destroyed in fire. Huh? Sefer Shel Tzadikim was completely burnt, yeah. Okay, so let's begin this second Maimer, which is really a beard on the first. Vayomru el kol adas b'nei Yisrael leimer teivar etz moed moedim chafetz b'ano avaya v'hevi yisanu al aretz hazois v'nasna lanu v'nitna lanu eretz asher yizavas chalav udvash. So basically we have here the Psukim where Yeshua and Kalev respond to the Meraglim. The Meraglim are saying that what? that there's no way we can go into Eretz Yisrael because it will spell disaster and catastrophe. And Yeshua and Kalev say, no, Toivar it's Moed. The land is good, very, very good. Im Chafetz Banu Hashem, if Hashem wants us, He'll bring us to this land. Unesan alanu, and He'll give it to us. Eretz, a land that Sheizavas Chalav Udvash. Why do they say Toivar it's Moed twice? Very good, very, very good. And what do they add here? That He's going to give it to us, the land that flows with milk and honey. Why is that relevant here in the counter argument to the sparse? So for this we have to introduce and explain the shoyrish, the root of the action of the meraglim lamayla. Lamayla means above, before this story. This is already the response of Yehoshua and Kalev, but before this is the story itself. To understand why they didn't want to go into Eretz Yisrael, not only that, v'ginuai, so they embarrassed it, they disgraced it. And he says again the word shoyrish. As I told you once, when it says the word shoyrish, a root is invisible. When you look at a tree, you don't see the roots, but the tree lives from the roots. Whenever you see a story, you could look at the story and you could look at the shoyrish of the story. The shoyrish of the story means the invisible roots of the story. Sometimes you could see a story and explain the story, but without the roots. And when you don't have the roots of the story, you're missing really the essence of the story. The story of the Meraglim has been explained by Mefarshim for many, many, many generations. What he wants to do in this Maimah is to explain the Shoyrish Maisa Meraglim. What is the underlying root, the core, which is often invisible? Because when you read the Chumash, you can often miss this point. It's not easily seen. And that's the underlying story of the Meraglim. Hini mevor Beitz Chaim, the Arizal says in Eitz Chaim, the Shoyrish HaMeraglim u'b'chinas Olam HaMachshava nikra Leah. He says the source of the Meraglim, they came from the world of thought, which is the world of Leah. Ki heimayu mideir hamidbar, they came from the generation of the desert, shenikru derdeya. That generation is called in Medrash derdeya, the generation of knowledge, the generation of perception. Valkein le'iratzul ashbel l'samsum l'kanes l'Eretz Yisrael shem b'chinas Olam HaDibur nikra Rachel. And therefore they didn't want to humble themselves to go into the Holy Land, because the land comes from the world of speech, which is called Rachel, and they came from the world of thought. So the Arizal teaches us that the Meraglim came from the Bechina of Leah, and Eretz Yisrael is connected to Rachel. This goes back to the two sisters of Leah and Rachel. Yaakov wanted to marry Rachel, but he ended up marrying Leah, and then he married Rachel. Leah and Rachel represent two forces. Leah represents the world of thought, and Rachel represents the world of speech. The Meraglim did not want to go down from Leah to Rachel. Leah is higher than Rachel. Leah is deeper than Rachel. Just like thoughts are higher than words and deeper than words. Words come from thoughts. Thoughts precedes words. The Meraglim came from the world of Leah, the world of Machshava. Rachel is the world of Eretz Yisrael, the world of Dibur. They did not want to go down from the world of Leah into the world of Rachel. That's what the Eitz Chaim says. The question is, what does this mean? What does it mean they came from Leah? What does it mean Leah is Machshava? What does it mean Eretz Yisrael is Rachel, which is Dibur, and they didn't want to go into it? To understand the explanation of these cryptic, Kabbalistic words of Eitz Chaim. The Yosher, it's known, Sheikir HaMitzvah. B'knisses Eretz Yisrael hu Kamashakos of Lasses Ba'aretz, Dahainu L'kayim Sham HaTorah VaMitzvahs. Ki yesh kama mitzvahs shetluyim ba'aretz davke kamay binyan Beis HaMikdash b'deimei and chuli. It's known that the main concept, the main objective to enter into Eretz Yisrael, the main mitzvah is, the expression of the pasuk is, Lasses Ba'aretz, to do in the land. Meaning, the mitzvahs that are going to be done, the Torah and the mitzvahs to be observed there, because there's many mitzvahs that for them you need Eretz Yisrael. The building of the Beis HaMikdash, and many similar things, as he brought in the previous Meiser, all the mitzvahs of Karbonas that are dependent on the Beis HaMikdash, all the mitzvahs Hatluyas Ba'aretz that are dependent on the agriculture, the soil of Eretz Yisrael, like Bikurim, like Trumas, like Meisres, like Shemitah, like Yovel, all these different matnas kahuna, all these mitzvahs depend on Eretz Yisrael.
Is it a secondary reason though, also so to do the mitzvahs that we have, like filling, also to do it in Eretz Yisrael?
Well, automatically the mitzvah of tefillin is done in a more elevated way in Eretz Yisrael. It's not dependent on Eretz Yisrael.
Right.
Tefillin we could do outside. Some mitzvahs are exclusively dependent on Eretz
Right.
Yisrael. But as a result of that, even all the mitzvahs are in a different state when they're done in Eretz Yisrael. There's even a famous Ramban. The Ramban says in Krishma, it says, "Va'avadetem meheira me'aloretz ha'tova sh'Hashem noisen lachem, v'samtem es dvarei eila al levavchem al nafshechem." So the Ramban says that the main kiyum of mitzvahs is only in Eretz Yisrael. The reason you're given mitzvahs in exile is that when you come back to Eretz Yisrael, you should be used to it. So the purpose of mitzvahs in Chutz La'aretz is only to get used to doing it in Eretz Yisrael. The Ramban brings from a medrash, Hatzivi l'chatziyunim, that in Chutz La'aretz you do the mitzvahs only as a siman, as practice for the real thing. It's like chinuch, it's like educating a child. So all mitzvahs in Chutz La'aretz is basically educating a child. When he becomes bar mitzvah, he should be able to do the mitzvah, so to speak, for real. That's what the Ramban explains in Krishma. That's how far it goes. For Inyan, who the Inyan in this is, Kehine ikar ha-Torah va-mitzvahs ulahavdil bein ha-Torah bein ha-Tameh. The main objective of Torah and mitzvahs is to separate between tahor, it's an expression in Shmini, lahavdil, to separate, to distinguish between the pure and the impure. Tahainu b'chinas birurim. The main objective of Torah and mitzvahs is birurim. Birurim comes from the word boirer, which means to select, to decipher, to choose, from the word levarer. Because whenever there's a mixture, you have to choose. If there's no mixture, you don't have to choose. Things are mixed, and you always have to distinguish. That's the objective of all Torah and mitzvah. All of life is about choices. At every moment, a person is being mevarer birurim, physically, emotionally, verbally, spiritually. In life, everything is blended. There's mixture. We're mixed. We're mixed. We're mixed up. We're mixed up between happiness and depression. Anybody? Between certainty, between certainty and uncertainty. Between certainty and uncertainty, between happiness and sadness, between being in a direction, directionless, being high and low, moral, immoral, selfless, selfish, right? Positive, negative, pessimistic, optimistic, confident or insecure. Huh?
Realistic and unrealistic.
Realistic or non-realistic, etc., etc. Everything is mixed up, everything, constantly. The objective of Torah and mitzvahs is to live a life where you're always being mevarer birurim, you're always being mavdil. This belongs to me, this doesn't belong to me. This I want to keep, this I don't want to keep. This is healthy, this is toxicity. This is my issue, this is your issue. V'chuli, v'chuli. And that's a big one. This is my issue, this is your issue. Huh? Selections, yeah. To be able to select. And in many ways, identifying is even more important than selecting. To be able to identify that there has to be a birur here. Even before I do the birur. Just to be able to say, this needs birur, that itself is extremely powerful and extremely important. Because if not, what happens is the person just gets swallowed up in a process or in an experience or in an emotion, and there's nothing left. The ability to be able to be mevarer, to be able to see things from a bird's eye view, and to be able to see not only the trees but the forest. And therefore you say, this tree belongs here, this tree belongs here. This is the beginning of the forest, this is the end of the forest. That ability is the essence of Torah and mitzvahs. Why is there such a mixture? As a result of the breaking. The Malkin, Kadmoyin, the Toyu. The primordial kings of Olam HaToyu, which is an expression of all the koiches of Elikus and Toyu, are called the early, the primordial, the Malkin Kadmoyim of Toyu. Enumerated in Parshas Vayishlach, Eila HaMelochem Hashem Molchu Beretz Edom Lifnei Meloch Malach Lebnei. So like we learned at length in Beshalach, the Maimah Bat Lechem Mishnah. Ki Yadu Naflu, as a result of that breaking, Naflu Rapach Nitzutz in the Toyu. As he mentions many times, 288 sparks of Olam HaToyu fell. What do we mean fell? Fell doesn't mean physically. Fell means they're not recognizable. V'nislapshu b'noiga. They enclose themselves in a shell that's called in Kabbalah, based on a pasuk in Yecheskel, the first Perek, Klipas Noiga. Noiga means translucent. Noiga means shining. It's a shell that's translucent. Liyas muravim toiv v'raki yadua. So there's a mixture, a taruvis of toiv and ra. Toiv and ra doesn't only mean good and evil. Toiv and ra, people make a mistake. They always translate in Likkutei Torah and Tanya and all these svarim, toiv good, ra evil. It's very hard to learn Tanya or any svarim if that's how you translate ra. Toiv means wholesome, ra means broken. And Tanya he brings from Koheles and Zoyar that all the might, Shlomo Melech says in Ecclesiastes, in Koheles and Ecclesiastes, Kol HaMaisim, all the deeds that are done under the sun are hevel, vanity, u'ru'us ruach. Ru'us ruach means of broken ruach. The word ra, like in Baba Kama, you have koisel, ra'ua. You remember Perek HaKoines, right? A weak wall. Ra'ua means broken. It's not wholesome. Shvach, yeah. Ra means anything that's broken. What do we mean it's broken? Shakultzich, yeah. It's not sturdy. Anything that's broken, what do we mean it's broken? Anything that is detached from its own source. When a person is not connected to their own organic roots, they're in a state of Ra. Now there's levels of how broken a person is. That's true. How splintered you are. How disassociated you are from yourself. But that is a definition of Ra. Definition of Ra doesn't mean you're an evil person. Evil, you may not be an evil, but you may be a broken person. A broken person means a person who's disconnected. That's what broken is. A shard, it's broken, it's disconnected from its source. Whenever you're disconnected from your source, that's a state of Ra. As a result of the Nephila, what's Nephila? That's what Nephila means. Nephila means you fall. Where do you fall? You fall into a place that doesn't belong to you. Person falls off something. They fall off something. They belong somewhere, but they fall away from it. Person is a neifel, and they don't recognize themselves anymore. They look in the mirror, it's not the same person who was there. They may recognize themselves physically, but they don't recognize who they really are. And they don't have a way of going back to who they are. And that's where great sadness comes from. It's the pain of being disconnected. Nephila, the first Nephila is the Shvira of Olam HaToyu. Shvira means broken, literally, and Nephila means you fall down. That in the sense that the nitzuts can't be recognized anymore. And because it can't be recognized anymore, like in Torah Vayeshev, we learned it a few weeks ago, and this Sunday Ba'aloischa, about the Oisius, he brings a mashal. You have a word Baruch, Beis Reish Vav Chaf, means blessed. What happens if you splinter the word into four? So now you have a flying Beis, a flying Reish. You take a Beis, you can't see in the Beis that it's part of a bracha. All you see in the Beis is a Beis. That's called Shvira. Why? Because you don't see it for what it really is. Really, it's part of a word Baruch, but you don't see it as part of a puzzle. You just see it as an isolated Beis. So when you see that, that happens also to a person himself or herself. He sees himself or herself in a splintered way. That's called Nephila. The whole mixture of Tov and Ra in the world happens from that Shvira of Olam HaToyu. So that there's Nitzutzis of Elikus, but they don't recognize themselves anymore. So there's a mixture between Tov and Ra, because the Tov becomes, it morphs into a state of brokenness, and that is basically what Ra is. They need to be elevated. The first thing is you have to refine them, select them, and separate them from the Ra that's connected to them. And then the Tov could go back to its source. As long as it's connected to things that are alien to itself, its Tov can't be revealed. Take a broken person looking to fill himself up and to become complete, he connects himself to different things. Those things may takabira. They're beyond broken. And now he becomes even more broken as a result. So the first thing is he has to disassociate from that Ra in order for him to be able to go back to himself. This is the structure of all mitzvahs. Mitzvahs esse, mitzvahs loisese. Aidei haloisese nifrid atov min hara, v'aidei ha'asiyu b'chinas aliyas atov l'mayla. The element of loisese in Judaism, which is what you don't do, is basically disengaging. This is not for me. It's borders. This I don't do, this I don't eat, this I don't touch, this I don't look at. That's all. What I don't do, you disengage, you create borders. And now there's mitzvahs esem. Mitzvahs esem is what I do, what I actively engage in, which is aliyas hatoiv l'mayla, it's bringing the toiv back to its source. The hainu al derech mashal. Kshoy says, a person does a mitzvah, k'goyin shenoitel esek l'naneya boy, oitzem v'oisim menu tzitzis. He takes a esek to shake it, or he takes wool from a sheep, and he turns it into tzitzis. He makes a talus cotton, a talus cotton. Why he brings the mitzvah of tzitzis fashteich, because it's Parshas Shlach. Why he brings the mitzvah of esrik, basically. She'esrik v'atzemer, he mebchinas noiga. The esrig and the wool are both called klippos noiga. What is klippos noiga? She'atoiv mu'urav shambera. An esrig is a physical fruit. Tzemer is a physical phenomenon. Like every physical reality, there's toiv and there's ra. What says there's toiv and there's ra? Godliness is concealed there. It's broken in the sense you don't see in the wool, it's divine energy. You don't see in a citrus or in a willow, it's divine energy. What you see is a physical fruit, but really there's toiv over there. Really it's a likus. But this is a likus melubash in klipas noiga, in a shell that's translucent. Why do we call it noiga? Because sometimes a likus is so concealed you can't do anything with it. A shtik chazer, you can't do anything with it. An esrig, wool, you could do a lot with it. It's like money. It's klipas noiga. When he does a mitzvah with this wool or with this esrig, so he introduces, he brings forth into it the hashra, the dwelling of the infinite light. The nichlal hatoiv, the nitzutzes, the toyish and eslabish, b'toich esrig, b'tzemna adei hashvira, b'oirin sofa nimshach adei mitzvah azos. The toiv of the sparks of Olam HaToyah which got enclosed in the esrig and in the wool through the breaking of the vessels. And therefore the nitzutzes came into this physical phenomenon. Now I do a mitzvah with this tzitzis. What do? There's an Ein Sof infinity that comes out through this mitzvah, and all the sparks in the tzitzis, in the wool, go back to their source.
What's the ra?
The ra is the klippah, the helm, the concealment.
Actual aspect is the ra.
Ah. The ra is the sense of brokenness, that it's not divine. It's detached from Hashem. That's why I said ra means broken, detached, disengaged. You understand? Yeah. Va'amnam ze'eino ikim k'shenizbaret chiluv.
The ra is because we don't see it? Because it's concealed? That's it? That's why?
Yeah, the godliness is concealed, and that allows for a person to do different things with wool. You can make different types of garments from wool, right? What you could do with an esrik? You could throw it in somebody's face, and black and blue and black. I mean, yeah. There's an esrig of Arla, for example. Yeah, that's Asr. Esrig of Arla, the first three years would be Taka Asr. Taka can't be Makai Mitzvah's esrig there. Everything in the world is called klipas noiga. Klipas noiga means it's neutral. It's neutral. It could be used in one way. It could be used another way. It could be used, and then the sparks of God are revealed in it. Or, no, you surrender to the ra, which means the outer shell, that eclipses its true purpose, its true meaning, its true essence. And then you use it contrary to what it's really made for, to its true design and its true purpose. That's what we mean by ra. Sometimes it could be lowered yet even more and be used for atmamish ra. Depends on the situation. Whether it's when you're dealing with food, you're dealing with money, you're dealing with a cup of coffee, you're dealing with an iPhone, you're dealing with a mic, you're dealing with a table. Any issue in the world, technology, science, clothes, business, every phenomenon in the world, in the physical world, is divine. It's all divine. It's all lives from godliness, from divine sparks. But because of the shviras hakelim, the beis and the reish are disconnected. You don't see in the world the einoid malvade, the oneness of it. So one could use the internet in a way that Torah spreads to the whole world, right? You have there a woman from Pakistan learning Likkutei Torah in the morning. That's how you could use the internet. And you could also use the internet in very different ways, which I don't have to be ma'irich on, right? It could become a source of addiction, of destruction, of laziness, of boredom, of immorality, of promiscuity. The same internet, the same technology. Or you could use it for harvatzas hatayra, for your futzah by nasacha chutzah. What's the choice? This is a person's choice. Anything you eat, everything in the world. Take science, for example, yeah? Science, if you study science correctly, it brings out the harmony of the world. It brings out the harmony of Hashem. It brings out Gadlus HaBorei. But some people could study science and it does the exact opposite. Yeah, very good. Why? Because it's a shell. Whenever there's a shell, you have to be able to pierce through the shell. If there's no shell, you don't have to pierce through it. Whenever there's a klippa, but it's noiga. Noiga means it shines. You could get through the shell. It's not so thick that you can't penetrate. You could penetrate, but you have to be able to penetrate. And in life, you always have to be able to do that. That's avodas habirurim, to be able to penetrate and see the toiv within. Right? Even when you're, let's say, educating a child. Whenever you're educating a child, there's the toiv and there's the ra. What do you mean there's toiv and there's the ra? There's behavior that is very problematic. There's behavior that is challenging. So you could just dismiss the child, or you have to look a little deeper. You have to be able to see what is behind it, and how do you help the child do birur in himself? Say, this belongs to me, this doesn't belong to me. This I could dismiss, this I don't want to dismiss, this I embrace, this I reject. That's the whole avodah of chinuch, is also avodah sabirurim, to be able to help people differentiate between themselves what they really want, what they don't want, who they really are, who they're not. Yeah? People get angry very fast. People have bad temperaments. To be able to let them see themselves in a way that they don't have to define themselves by it. That is avodah sabirurim. And that's, so in the mitzvah he says, you take the esrig, you take the tzemer, and the nitzutzas go back to their source through the mitzvah.
Is it possible he uses esrog because, not the esrog itself, but because of l'na'anea? Why does he add l'na'anea? Because it's esrog. L'na'anea represents shaking. Maybe it's something to do with within the broken, with the shaking, not being calm.
You're saying that when you shake the esrog, it actually looks like birur, like you're shaking it, like that.
Combining it with
okay, and the tzitzis also, you kiss. Huh?
Right.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean seeing yourself without finding yourself. Seeing yourself without finding yourself.
Again, what? What does it mean? What?
Seeing yourself without finding yourself.
Finding yourself?
Yeah,
Seeing
that's what it
yourself
says. Seeing
without
yourself
finding
without
yourself.
finding yourself.
Defining yourself.
Define.
Sag in Yiddish.
Instead of you gotta be able to see yourself without finding yourself, or defining yourself. You don't define yourself.
No, I was saying that a person sometimes sees certain things in themselves, and that defines them. That becomes who they are in their eyes. So they need the avodas habirurim to be able to be mafred, to be able to be mvarer, and say, yeah, this is an emotion, this is an experience, but it's not everything. In other words, I can have these emotions, I can feel these emotions, I'm fine with feeling these emotions, they won't destroy me, and I don't have to be afraid of them. I don't have to be afraid of them because they don't tell the whole story about me. If you believe that every thought or every emotion you have is all there is to you, then you have to be very afraid of it. You know what I mean? Because there's nothing else to me. So I have to make believe they don't exist, because if they do exist, then I'm really bad off. So I have to invest tremendous energy in denying their existence. And because that's false, so whenever you expend energy on something that's false, it comes back to bite you. Because you're wasting your time and you're wasting your energy and you're using it for something that's not true. So it's going to come back to haunt you, and it feels very bad. So whenever somebody thinks that their thoughts or emotions is everything that there is about them, so they have to repress them and crush them because they don't want to feel like this about themselves. So what happens is they're expending all their energy to dismiss something that really is there, but they make believe it's not, so it becomes very painful. When a person can appreciate the fact that I have thoughts, I have emotions, I have experiences, some of them are not very geschmack. They could be very ugly or they could be very painful, but it doesn't define all of me. It doesn't define my essence. It doesn't have to control me. It doesn't tell the whole story. It's part of my story. So then you could actually let it be because you put it in context. By putting it in context of what it is, by doing avodas haberurim, you don't have to spend extra energy to mutilate it and deny it and crush it and destroy it, making believe it doesn't exist when it really does exist. You rather can give it its place and understand that that's part of your journey. That's part of your avodah. That's part of your destiny. It doesn't turn you into a horrible, evil, hopeless, miyuashdika, depressed, and despair person. So paradoxically, the fact that you realize that it's not it's not all you, it's not the whole you can let it dance around. You can let it be without feeling horrible about it, without judging yourself and turning yourself into a meshugana, or judging it. Because you know it doesn't have to control you, it's fine. That's what I meant. Verstehst? So let's finish here. So he says, Ava amnam ze einoi kem shenes bardet chile v'nifrid min hara v'naseb chines keli lashras erin sof. But for this, you first need to separate it from the ra, so it should become a vessel for the Ein Sof. So when you do the mitzvah, the Ein Sof could dwell in the esrig or the wall, and the nitzitz could become included in the elikus. But for this, you have to disengage it from the ra. This explains the concept of dikduke mitzvahs, the meticulousness in mitzvahs. For example, you learn Hilchas Esrig, Liyas Esrig, Kach v'Kach Dafka. The halacha tells you the esrig has to be like this or like this. And there's people who stand with magnifying glasses for 7-8 hours searching for the esrig. I was in an esrig store.
Searching for the esrig, searching for the blemish.
Very good.
That's right.
So I was in an esrig store last year, 2 years ago, before Sukkot, and I was choosing an esrig. So there was this guy apparently who was there from Alois HaShachar. I came at night from Alois HaShachar till the night, and he was looking and looking and looking. It was a big store, there was a big selection. So finally the owner apparently was a little exasperated or exhausted. So he says, it's a funny thing. How long did it take you to choose your wife? You're choosing an esrig. How many hours did you spend with your kala before you got engaged? How long did it take? He said, it's 30 minutes. So he says, wow, your esrig is spending more time on finding the right esrig than finding the right wife. Why is it? What's more important? Yeah. Okay, I'm not going to discuss his answer now. But but it's an interesting thing. Separate few shiurim. It's an interesting thing, these dikduke mitzvahs. Yeah. So he says, ha'esek kach v'kach dafka b'im shechisse b'achas medikduke v'posel. If one of the details in the essay that the halacha prescribes is missing, it's not good. Now you might say it's a little bit of a funny thing. God, this infinite God, yeah, what's going to happen? If you put a needle in the esrog, you make a blemish in the esrog, or a piece is missing, or whatever, he looks at the esrog and he says, you know what? This is really giving me a miserable sukkos. What is the tfisas makim? What is the significance of all the dikduke mitzvahs? B'cheinat tzitzis. In chaser chut echad in psula. One strand is missing, is disqualified. So now think about it. You ever saw a picture of planet Earth from outer space?
Yes.
You know what it looks like?
Yep.
You ever play Chinese checkers? What do they call it? Chinese checkers? Huh?
Marbles.
The marbles, yeah? Our planet is smaller than a marble from outer space. From the perspective of infinity, it's not even a marble. Like maybe a speck, a grain of sand, maybe. Right? So we take our grain of sand very seriously, especially if there's a fight over real estate. But from the perspective of outer space, it's a grain of sand. In this grain of sand, yeah, in this grain of sand, which we're calling our planet, yeah, you have billions and billions of people, never mind billions and billions of insects and animals and mammals and fish and planets and trees and bushes and sand, and most of it is water. And then you have one human being is not even a speck of dust somewhere in this parsha. And this human being puts on tzitzis. And one of the tzitzis is missing a strand. So the infinite God is like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is really not good. This is not good. Psapela of Azach. Right? You ate Cholon Shabbos afternoon. You want to eat pizza mitzvah Shabbos. You waited 5 hours and 59 minutes. 1 minute, he ate pizza. A gewalt. Proportion. He says, what's the havon of all these diktukei mitzvahs? So he says, the hainu, the pshat is, she'einem b'chines keli la'ashras alakus. Before there should be ashras alakus in something, alakus should be able to dwell in something, the keli has to be suitable. The keli has to be clean, has to be tzugepast. Just like if a person enters into a session with anger, or poisonous feelings, or toxicity, they're blemished and they can't open themselves up to a certain truth. They just can't be there. So any physical thing, in order to do the mitzvah's essay, you first have to be mafrid, the toy from the ra, to make it a keli for the Ein Sof. That's what the diktukei mitzvahs are.
We were talking about Sur Meirah first.
Well, here it's even in Asay Toiv. It's the Sur Meirah within Asay Toiv. Al kol ponim muven mizeh, she'ikir ha'toyre v'ha'mitzvah s'ulevarer ha'toiv min ha'rash nesada v'ayde ha'shvira, la'fride meirah la'asayis l'sharsh. The nekud is that the main objective of Torah and mitzvahs is to elevate, to refine the toiv from the ra, because of the mixture through the breaking, to separate it from the ra and bring it back up to its source. That's the nekud. But he finishes this perek, ach be'emes ein ze muven. But really this is all not understood. He'ech yigrim ha'adam b'chines hashras ein sof ha'desh oisa mitzvah. It's akasha. How can a person really cause the dwelling of infinity through doing a mitzvah? Ki ma shayches v'ischabrus yesh leil ha'lekus ha'yidei shaloivish ha'tfilin ha'misatef ha'betzitzis lignem ha'yidei zam shachas ein sof. What shayches, what connection is there between him and godliness, that he does an act, he puts on tefillin, or he puts on tzitzis, and you say as a result of this, the light of infinity came into this hide of the animal, or this wool of the sheep, or this body of the hand, or this mouth that's speaking, or whatever, or this esrog, or this money that he's giving for tzedakah. A person does it, and through this, he brings in, he reveals, and brings out the Ein Sof in it, and all the nitzutzas are oila l'sharsha, or even lignem afradas ha'toiv naradesher sur meirah. Or you say that as a result of him being sur meirah, he actually has the ability to do a whole avodas habirurim, and to separate all the nitzutzas from the ra. Where does a person, what's the mechanism to understand that a human being living here does this mitzvah and he can accomplish such a thing, whether in the negative of sur meirah and the positive of asay tov? You want to somebody?
The opposite.
Are you?
The opposite of it, to make it worse.
Right. We'll continue tomorrow. Okay, Perik Beis, page 74. Acha inyan yuvon, the whole inyan will be understood. Al pi ma shekasav b'zoyar, based on what it says in Zoyar, which was of course what he mentioned in the first Maimer, but here it's going to be explained at great length. The Zoyar says in Parshas Truma, Kadaskafia Sitra Acher is Talik Ikara de Kuchabricha B'chulu Almin. When Sitra Acher, when the other side, the side of which is antithetical to holiness, is subdued, the glory of Kuchabrichu, the glory of Hashem, extends throughout all of the worlds. Istalik literally means departs, like his nistalik, siluk. But here, istalik doesn't mean it goes away. Istalik means it extends, it spreads, it travels. Just like histalkos doesn't mean a person really goes away completely. It means the soul moves. It moves from one location to another location.
In an increasing way?
In this case, it means actually that it extends everywhere. But chulu almin, more than it was before.
The real English word is metastasizes, but it has negative connotations.
Right,
Usually
metastasizes, right.
Right word.
Yeah, metastasizes, but here in the positive sense, right. The Hine Yadua, to explain this, it's known, Sheyesh shnei b'chinas b'klolus ha'ishtalshelus ha'olamus. It's knowing that there are two dimensions. B'chinas means dimensions, aspects. When we speak about the general evolution of the worlds, what are these two b'chinas? When we say hishtalshelus ha'olamus, hishtalshelus comes from the word shalshelis, as we discussed a few times. Shalshelis literally means a chain, where one rung extends from another rung, lower and then lower and lower, and each rung is connected to the one above it, and as a result of that, the lowest rung and the highest rung are, of course, interlinked through all of the rungs in between. The metaphor, however, is far from perfect, because in a chain there's no qualitative difference between the rung on the top and the rung on the bottom. It's just mazel. This rung happens to be on the top, this rung happens to be on the bottom, if you want to even call it bad mazel. I'm not sure that the rungs are too depressed about the hierarchy. When we speak about hishtalshelus ha'olamus, we of course mean an evolution where each rung represents a descent of energy that becomes more concrete, more brute. So basically, each rung, the energy assumes an incarnation that is closer to the physical. So there's higher means it represents the divine more, and then it comes down lower and lower until this world. So he says in the hishtalshelus ha'olamus, in the evolution of the worlds, there's two b'chinas. And this is two b'chinas that exist everywhere. That's why he says it's in klolus ha'ishtalshelus. Klolus ha'ishtalshelus means you're always going to find it. It's going to be everywhere. Now here we're introduced to a concept which, if I'm not mistaken, we haven't had this yet in any of the Maimarim that we have learned from when this shir began last year, Purim time. Chayavinish L'Psuma B'Puri, I think, was our first Maimah that we learned. I don't think that this concept was introduced in any of the Maimarim. Just like there are many concepts that you keep on seeing, they're recurring themes, because the Balatanya was a system man. He was a man of systems. So everything works in a system. Not everything, but a lot of things work in a system. This goes to the genre of Mamali and Soivev, or Atzilus and Bia, Gvul, Bli Gvul, Nefesh Alikis, Nefesh Bahamas, Guf, Neshama, etc. But here is a new concept which is known very well in the works of Kabbalah, in the works of the Arizal. This is a well-known concept, but as usual in Kabbalah, these concepts are very, very coded. They're very cryptic, as one could immediately see when they open up the works of Kabbalah. V'heima nikroyim, and here he's going to try to explain it in his own derech and style. V'heima nikroyim Igulim v'Yosher. These two dimensions are called Igulim and Yosher. V'hem gamkin b'chinas nefesh v'ruach kiyadu. They're also associated with the two dimensions called nefesh and ruach, soul and spirit. Now literally, Igulim means from the word igul. Igul is a circle. Igulim means circles. Yosher comes from the word Yosher, which means straight, like linear lines. Igulim is not Yosher, Igulim is circles. Yosher from the word Yosher would be like straight lines. What does this mean? That in the whole evolution of the world, you have Igulim, you have circles, and you have straight lines, which are Nefesh and Ruach. HaHefresh beinayim, the difference between them, going to be now a long explanation with a long mashal, with a long metaphor. So let's read. Igulim, when we speak about Igulim, ha'oiris hem klulim sham behiskalalus, bebchinas helam, mibli hischalkos leprati prati is bebchinas gilu. All of the lights, all of the oiris, all of the energies are included there, behiskalalus. They are integrated in a concealed fashion, without being divided into many details in a revealed way. Hence it's called Igulim. Why? Just like a circle is uniform and not divisible. You can't point to a ball, a circle, and say this is the beginning, this is the middle, this is the end. We were discussing Shavuos, the international date line. One of the issues here is there's no point of the globe. You want to take out a globe, Moshe? There's no point in the globe. Here, pass it down if you mind. Don't mind. Pass the world, yes. That's a good thing. Let's try to change it to the better. There's no point. The sun, what we're experiencing is sunrise and sunset. But the problem in halacha is, where does the sun rise and where does it set? In other words, where do you say the day starts? There's no point. I could say the sun rises. The Japanese love saying that the sun rises first in Japan. That's why they're superior. From their perspective, it rises first in Japan. Because east of Japan, you have the North Pacific Ocean. Nobody's living there. But I say the sun rises here first. Why does it rise here first? Maybe it rises here first. Maybe it rises in Hawaii first, in New York first, in Los Angeles. Wherever you are, you could say, this is where it begins. And the point is, there's no beginning, there's no middle, there's no end. Every part of the ball could be considered a beginning and a middle and an end. And that's why we are forced, perhaps arbitrarily, that's the question, how Allah deals with it, to create an arbitrary line where we say, for our own convenience, this is the beginning. So you have an international date line, and from there you say is the beginning of day. And therefore on one side is going to be one day, and the other side is going to be 24-hour difference. Simply because we have to create a beginning and an end. In every eagle, you don't have ischalkus. There's no essential division that is noticeable. What's the quality here that he's talking about? That the lights, all the iris are there behiskalalas, but they're still concealed, and therefore there's no hischalkus, there's no division. B'chinas gilei, and that's why it could be Igulim. B'chinas hayosher. Yosher is different. Shemizgalim iris. All the lights are revealed. Umischalkim leprote proteus. Hence they become divided not only into details, but into very specific details. Prote proteus means protim in the protim. Lias klulim miyud. So you'll have, for example, each oir encompasses 10. The yud miyud. And then each one of them also encompasses 10. So from 10, you get much more. So you'll have each oir will not just be itself, but it'll be encompassing another 9 dimensions. So we'll have 10 dimensions in it, like we have by Spheres Omer. Chesed shebechesed, Gvura shebechesed, Tefer shebechesed. And then, so you have klulim miyud, you don't have 1, you have 10. And then these 10 also have yud. So there's 2 dimensions. First of all, it's not 1 oir, there's 10. So the oir is basically made up of 10 dimensions. That's already specifics. And each one of those 10 dimensions will also have within them the 10 dimensions. So from 10 you have basically 100.
Is he using 10 because of the spheres?
Yeah, that's why he's using 10, because of the spheres. Hamashal bazet, to give a metaphor for this. Kamoy ha'ila shemakif es ha'olol v'koilalai. The term Ila and Alol is a very frequent term, even though today it's not used so much in the vocabulary of learning. It's a very frequent term in the works of the Rambam and all of his works of philosophy, not Yad HaChazaka, and all of the works of Jewish philosophy. Ila basically is an antecedent, and Alol is what comes from the antecedent. Ila is the cause, and Alol is the effect of the cause, that which emerges from the cause. So whenever you have in the world an Ila and an Alol, and what doesn't have an Ila and an Alol? My mother is my Ila, I am the Alol. My child is the Alol of my Ila. So I am a child, but I'm also a father. So I'm both. I'm an Alol, I come from a previous place, and I become a source for something else. That's basically how our world functions. Every tree that you look at is an Alol. There's an antecedent to the tree. There's a seed that grew this tree, but that seed itself came, say an apple tree came from an apple, so that seed is an alul of the previous apple tree, which is of course an alul of yet the previous seed, but that seed is an ila and an alul. And that's how it goes back all the way to Adam and Eve, to the 6 days of creation, when the first Elois were created physically. But then you have spiritual Elois. So everything in the world is basically Ila v'alul. Tracing something back to its source means tracing the alul back to the Ila. But then the source itself is a disciple, is an offspring. So you could take your family tree back to your great-great-grandmother. She is your Ila, but of course she is only a child of somebody else who is her Ila, etc. Whenever you have Ila and Alul, ha'ila makif es ha'alul v'koilalai. There's the concept of the Ila still encompassing the Alul, the mother's womb encompassing the child, so to speak, and koilalai, in containing it. Koilalai, which is from the word Keli, from the word koilel, it encompasses it, it contains it. Tahainu kamayal derech mashal. Harav shemashpia seichel l'talmidai. The metaphor of education, communication, and teaching is always a frequent metaphor in Likkutei Torah with a Rav and a Talmud. You have the Rebbe, the teacher, the master, who wants to communicate ideas, seichel, to his student, his disciple. Kasher tzorich lashpiyah seichel elav. When the Rav wants to communicate seichel, which means ideas to the student, mitztarech leided b'madrigosoi uletzamtze mesichloi la'ayin al klei hasagas hatalmid chuli. The prerequisite is that the teacher, who may be a brilliant genius, he must descend from his own space. Uletzamtze mesichloi. He has to shrink, compress, limit his intellectual output to be ma'ayin in the kli of hasagas hatalmid. He has to scrutinize. He has to delve into the keli of the Talmud. What is the capacity of the student's brain to understand what he wants to say? If he doesn't take time to delve into be ma'ayin, what type of container the student has, the teaching will not be very successful or effective. And then he could communicate the idea according to the erech, according to the measurement, so to speak, the capacity of the student. If I'm pouring a liquid into a cup, the first thing I have to know is, I have to know the dimensions of the cup. Because how strong I'm going to pour. I could take the pitcher and just turn it over. If I have a huge pitcher. If I have a 7-ounce cup, I turn over the pitcher and half of the water is gone. And the cup doesn't get full either. So with the student, it becomes even more than this. When you're talking about spiritual or intellectual communication, often the teacher is completely clueless as to who his student is, or who her student is. So the first thing is he has to go out from his own space, figure out the space of the student, and then he could communicate an idea that fits and suits and can illuminate and enlighten and inspire and lift up and expand the intellectual horizons of the student. However, in the core of his own ideas, the Rebbe, he already contains the entire seichel, the entire idea that's going to go to the student from the beginning to the end. Even the flow that he gives the Talmud, which really is supposed to suit, it's supposed to take on the shape of his brains, the shape of his mind. In other words, the information has to suit the container. So he has to understand what type of intellectual container. Literally like an image, it's like a mold. If you have a certain mold, right, a certain shape, you have to fit into that mold if that's what you want to do. So you have to know the mold of your student. You have to understand the disposition, his intellectual disposition, the character of his seichel, and your hashpah has to fit that. If not, you're not really speaking to the person. So this is a very challenging dimension in education, because this is before you teach. This is not the teaching. This is all the homework you have to do before you teach. It's the prep work, but not just prep work to have a clear glass and a clear message. Prep work of understanding who you're talking to. Most communication fails because nobody knows who they're talking to. They're busy expressing themselves. They're not busy talking to another person. Talking to another person doesn't mean talking at them. It doesn't even mean talking to them. Here it says you have to talk in them. Don't talk to them, talk in them. You want to pour the fresh concrete into the mold that exists. And then slowly you may expand the mold, but at this moment it's not expanded yet. If you're not speaking on that level, it goes over my head. What does it mean it goes over my head, so to speak? It doesn't go into me because my kelim are not being dealt with. So therefore, the Rav must do this. But the Rav, before that, in his own seichel is koilo. Number one, the whole seichel of the Talmud. The capacity of the Talmud is in him. And also the tzuras ha'ashpa, which is b'tzir v'oifen seichel shel Talmud, harei klula b'seichel shel Rav. It's all contained in the Rav's mind. B'skira achas, with one scan, bilti yischalkus l'chalakim, not the visible. Not the visible. In other words, the entire shear, practically speaking, that the Rav is going to give to this Talmud is there in his mind. Is it there in a divisible, identified, differentiated way? No, it doesn't have to be. It's all part of his knowledge. It's all part of his ideas. When it comes out to the Talmud, it has to be specified. Before that, it's just included in his general knowledge. So the teacher who's teaching a 5-year-old boy, Aleph Beis, or Chumash, or Mishnayos, all that information that he's going to be communicating to the Talmud is there before. But it doesn't have a distinct identity. It's just part of the reservoir of knowledge and wisdom that exists in his mind. It's just all there. The alul is in the ilah. The seed is still in the tree. It did not leave the tree, leave the fruit to become a source of a new tree. It's still all inside of him. The alul is in the ilah. The ilah is still makiv the alul. Makiv the alul. Sai the seichel of the Talmud, and sai the hashpah that he gives to the Talmud, which is suitable to the tzura of the seichel. That's why he could give hashpah. If he doesn't have that type of seichel in him, he can't communicate with that type of seichel. It would be like communicating with, somebody from a different planet. Now he goes further. V'hinei gam achar shenimshach me'erav la'talmid. Oh, and he mentions beskira achas, with one scan. Let's start with one scan. One glance, exactly. It's not differentiated. In the Rav's mind, you don't say, this part belongs to your student, this part belongs to you. It's all one entity. It's not divisible. And now he goes, even after the communication, after the shir, in the beginning of the comprehension, as I seichel atalmid hu mukaf al derech mashal, may oisei oira seichel sheshefei alei meharav. He gives you a very graphic illustration. The mind of the student is mukaf. It's encircled, so to speak, metaphorically speaking. It's encompassed from the light of the seichel that the Rav just gave him. The seichel surrounds him and envelops him. It's almost like his entire globe, his entire brain is inside of the intellectual idea that the Rav just communicated to him. It surrounds him from all sides. That oir ha-seichel is oidif. That's from Parshas Truma. Oidif means it's so to speak extra, meaning it envelops him from all sides. It envelops the seichel of the Talmud and encompasses him from all sides. Overlaps. In circles, yeah. Yeah. It would be like when somebody is submerged in the mikveh, it's not just exact, right? There's extra water more than your body. So the whole body is now inside of the mikveh. So the entire mind of the Talmud, we're talking a real Rebbe and a real student who are really connected. We're not talking about there's daydreaming going on in the middle of the shir, or texting going on, or him sitting and waiting, when is recess, when is going to be lunch. We're talking about a real communication, which is based on a very powerful relationship, both intellectually and emotionally. So at this stage, right now, the mind of the Talmud, if he's a real Talmud, is lost, is enveloped, is submerged in the ideas coming from the Rebbe. Mamish, like, if you want to use a body of water, his mind, if the body of water is wisdom, which the Rambam does say, that's what a mikveh is. The Rambam says, mei hadas haTorah, so it's actually a good metaphor. You have to be completely inside the mikveh. If part of your hand is sticking out, no, it doesn't work. There's nothing but the water now. There's nothing but the seichel enveloping the mind of the student. And no part of him sticks out. It's oidif. Oidif means it's outside, it encircles him completely.
But even if it's Gimmel's Kabbalah, so he's only getting pratios. You see, where do you ever see that heke from the beginning of a relationship?
He's going to explain. The explanation is the student in the beginning of the hashpah, he's just starting off. He's not getting the seichel to its full depth. It's impossible. It's being built. It's the beginning of the Kabbalah. At the moment, what he's still getting is general principles, bilti his chalkos, not with the full division, lamed al kol chelke aseichel vasvaris kol davar b'fnei atzman, to be able to really comprehend all the parts of the idea and all of the logical ideas. Each idea contains separately a whole mansion with every item, with every piece of furniture, with every idea contained. Right now, it's the beginning. And because it's the beginning, so therefore, he's still getting the general thrust, the general perspective. It's not all worked out and figured out and sketched out and fleshed out. Va'alkein, klolus oisei ha-seichel, hu makif l'seichel ha-talmud ubchinas makif levada dayan u'bilti yischalkus. At this stage, you could say, the general idea of the student, of the teacher, encompasses the mind of the student in a state of makif, which means it encompasses it completely, u'bilti yischalkus, it's not divisible, v'zehu mashal ubchinas esesfiris di Igulim. This is a metaphor to understand the Kabbalistic concept that there are 10 spheros and they're all circles. Omnam. Acher kach, stage B, when the student will contemplate the flow of intellect and he'll get into its depth and he will comprehend it well, oz yeh adirab. Now the exact opposite is going to happen. What's the opposite? Adirab means to the contrary. Adirab, the other way around. Sichloi makif la'oisei shefa haseichel. Now his mind encircles the ideas. Now the ideas are inside of him, rather him being inside of the idea. Stage 1, the seichel of the Rebbe encompasses him, and his mind is basically submerged like in a mikveh in the seichel. Stage B, when the student actually comprehends and contemplates the full depth of the idea and really gets it, now it's the other way around. Now the idea of this teacher is submerged in his mind. His mind contains the idea. The idea doesn't contain him, he contains the idea. Because the flow of intellect enters into him like an internalized oir, meaning the energy is completely inside. It's like a hand in a glove. He becomes the glove, his mind becomes the glove. He becomes the container. First of all, he gets it well. There's no ambiguity. Plus, he gets all the aspects. There's a pyramid. He understands this nekuda, that nekuda. It's a house. A house is built of many different components coming together. All the chelkei hasvaras, this nekuda, that nekuda, that nekuda. Kol echad al mechoyna b'fnei atzmai. Each one has its place. V'loy b'derech klal avad. It's not any more general. V'hu al derech mashal b'chinas Yosher. This is a mashal for Esses spheres of Yosher, shel b'chinas arpnimi, which is called an arpnimi. And he finishes this nekuda. V'lechei nikri Igulim b'chinas nefesh v'Yosher b'chinas ruach. This is the association with that other title in Kabbalah. Igulim nefesh, Yosher ruach. Why? Ruach is a higher state than nefesh, and it follows nefesh. It doesn't precede it. It's like two stages of intelligence. There's moichin the katnus, which is a more primitive form of awareness, and moichin the gadlus, which is an expansive form of intelligence. Barnash, a human being. When he's born, he's given a nefesh. As he expands in life, he opens himself up. Zacha doesn't only mean merit. The word schus means he becomes refined. Zakus, shemen zach, clear. He becomes cleared up. Zacha. Yavin leirucha, you give him the rucha. Meshakasu Beitz Chaim, Shari, Igulim, v'Yosher, Anavgim. Beitz Chaim from the Arizal has a special portal called the portal of Igulim and Yosher, branch 3, where he discusses this, the nefesh and the ruach. What's the mashal that the Balatanya is teaching us here? What is the metaphor between the Rav and the Talmud? The two stages, Igulim and Yosher. When the student is sitting by the shiur of this Rebbe, this Rav we're assuming here in this metaphor is an absolute incredible genius and an incredible teacher, which is why the student is sitting eagerly at the class. He's not sitting wiggling, his fingers looking what to do. That has to be dismissed from the metaphor. So many of your experiences in yeshiva, please don't bring them into this to this classroom because I know not everybody's experienced exactly this. Here you're dealing with a student who feels that it's a privilege to sit at the feet of this master because the information that's being communicated is priceless. It's extraordinary. Huh? And it's not going to happen again. What happens that day is not going to happen again because the teacher is not going to be in the same state. So he sits, there's an eagerness, emotional eagerness, but an intellectual eagerness. And it's new material. So now what are the stages? So the Baal HaTanya says a normal stage of teaching communication is, from the teacher's perspective, before he starts, he has to completely focus in on the student. From the student's perspective, he has to completely focus in on the teacher. If each one is thinking about themselves, it's not going to work. The teacher has to be thinking about the student, and the student has to be thinking about the teacher. If the teacher is thinking about his desire to express himself, that's not a teacher. He's a great guy, but he's not a Rav. If the Talmud is thinking about his own understanding rather than complete dedication to listen to the ideas that transcend him, he won't be able to receive new ideas. So everybody has to go out of their own zone in order to be able to experience this relationship. There's a beautiful vart from the Panim Yafis. The Panim Yafis was a chaver of the Baal HaTanya. His name was Reb Pinchas Halevi Horowitz. He wrote a sefer Hafla Masechta Ksuvas, very well known yeshivish sefer Hamakna Masechta Kedushin. He wrote a lot of svarim. On Chumash he has a sefer Panim Yafis. Hafla is an acronym. Harav Pinchas Levi Ish Horowitz. Hafla. And he was a gon, a very big gon. He was a brother of Reb Shmelka of Niklisburg. There was two brothers, Reb Pinchas Horowitz and Reb Shmelka of Niklisburg, who was the rabbi of Frankfurt in Germany. So in his Sefer Panim Yafis, I think in his Akdama I saw it, in his introduction to Panim Yafis, he says a vort that the Gemara says in Maseches Chagiga, the Pasuk says in Malachi, Ki sifsei koyin yivshmuru das, Torah yivakshu mipiyu ki malach Hashem tzvakesu. You should learn Torah from your teacher because he's an angel. So the Gemara says, if your Rav is like a malach, learn from him. If he's not like a malach, don't learn from him. Ask the Panim Yavas, we're going to find the Rebbe who's a malach. Yeah? There was once a woman telling another woman, she says, my husband, how lucky I am, he's a malach. And the other one starts crying, she says, I know what you mean, mine is also not a mensch. So, if we're looking for not a mensch, then you could probably find, I don't know how many, but you could find. But if you're looking for, where are you going to find a malach? So the Panim Yafis says, vart, something special about chinuch. There's a pasuk in Zcharia, it's Haftarah of Chanukah. V'nasati lecha mahalchim bein ha'oimdim ha'ela. I will make you a mahalech, a mover among these who stand. So Chazal explain in many svarim, malachim are called oimdim, neshamas are called mahalchim. Angels stand, souls move, because angels basically follow their own orbit. There's no tremendous cataclysmic quantum growth. There is gradual growth. On the neshama down here, as we learned before with Sitra Kadeskafi Sitra Achara, there's quantum leaps. There's this tremendous, so it's called a mahalach, a mover. A malach is an oimid. Malach doesn't fall, he doesn't grow. He doesn't end up in the abyss, and that's it. That's a malach. Zag the Gemara, you want to know what type of Rav to learn by? A malach Hashem tzvakis. Why? A teacher is teaching you. He taught Baba Basra already 15 years. Before the first day of yeshiva, he doesn't even look at it. He already did it 15 years, and he basically repeats himself. Often, yeah. But if a Rav is a real Rav, he's a creative person, he gets frustrated. He wants to teach new things for himself. He wants to be excited about his own classes. So what does he do? He's sitting with a bunch of students. He's not going to go down to their level. He wants to express himself. So therefore he teaches ideas that get him excited because he wants to move, he wants to grow. So he says, no. You want a Rav who's a malach. A malach is somebody who's ready to be an oimid. He's ready to remain in his own position, not grow tremendously for the sake of the student. So even though he learned this Mishnah 100 times, so now he's going to sit and lower himself down to the madrega of the Talmud. He doesn't want to. He wants to say chidushim. So he says the Rav has to be daimel malach Hashem tzvakis. He's ready to be an oimid, not a mahalach. In other words, accommodate the mindset of his student, even though that means he has to remain an oimid, relatively static. More station. Now the truth is, as a result of that, he'll experience more growth on another dimension. But mitzad the communication, this is a nisayon that a lot of rebbes have, a lot of Rosh Yeshivas have. He's talking to a classroom. He doesn't want to stop. He wants to discuss a Geshmak Reb Chaim. He wants to delve into a Marach of Rebbe Akiva Eiger. He wants to reconcile two Rambams based on a Ktsas. But the boys don't understand the Mishnah. The boys don't know how to read a Rashi. The main thing is they're sitting and hearing pilpulim on pilpulim and pilpulim. This happens in a lot of yeshivas. And you come out, you say, but what's the base? He doesn't know how to read the Gemara. He doesn't understand the basics. Doesn't know the Mishnah. He doesn't know the Pasuk Chumash on which the Mishnah is based. The main thing is, he heard a stiddas between two Rambams, the Kesef Mishnah, the Magid Mishnah, the Akiva Eiger, the Shailer, Reb Chaim's teretz. Again, it looks good, but it's ridiculous. It's not a way of learning. It's frustrating for everybody. There's no growth there. So the Rav has to be doim l'malach Hashem tzvakas. In the lashon here of the Balatanya, he has to make a tzimtzum. He has to go into the seichel of his Talmud from his perspective. Now let's speak from the Talmud's perspective. If the Talmud sits like this, I don't mean if anybody's sitting like this, you could continue. But it's usually how Jews sit, right? What are you going to tell me? Somebody said, fine. I'm looking at Reb Moshe. Lenny's a daf a different b'china. There's a heche von Igulim and Yosher.
Lenny's the Rav.
Okay, noch besser. So, yeah, if he's sitting there, let's see if you could tell me something. He doesn't have that dedication, then it's not going to work. The Talmud has to go out of himself and be completely focused to hear the seichel of the Rav. That's what he has to do. And not try to fit it into his paradigms, but on the contrary, to open himself up to what is being communicated. To what is being communicated. For this, he has to trust that there is something worthwhile here to do. He has to trust the text, he has to trust the information, has to trust his Rebbe. Now, when this happens, there's two stages. Mitzad the Rav, all the seichel of the Talmud, everything that was there, that's going to be communicated to the Talmud, is all contained in the Rav's mind. But when it's in his mind, it's not differentiated, it's just part of his mind. In order to communicate it, he has to focus in on it and suit the information to the student. Where was all that information? It was all part of it. It was just in the whole reservoir of ideas. It was included. It was all a klal. It wasn't divisible. But now he has to identify it, zoom into it, and accentuate it and access it in order to give it to the student. Now, when he's already starting to give it to the student, there's also two stages. Just like by the Rav himself, there were two stages. Stage number one was klal. Stage number two was prat. Stage number one is the way it's in himself, where it's just one big cholent. Stage number two is you want to give a shir. Tune into your audience. You have to know your audience. There's no teaching if you don't know your audience. One of the biggest mistakes that teachers, speakers, communicators make is they don't know who they're talking to. You have to understand who you're talking to. Their mental space, their limitations, their challenges, their sensitivities, their intellectual capacity. That's before even you begin preparing your shir. That's the backdrop. That's who I'm talking to. Now what am I going to say? I know who I'm talking to. Now what am I going to say? What am I going to say that works for these people, that works for these children? You see it sometimes with teenagers. You know, you're talking to teenagers, 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds. Today teenagers are already 6 years old. But 13-year-olds, 14 years old, and they're just yawning. You know, when they start yawning on you, it's like, it's not that they disagree, it's just irrelevant. You ever have that experience? Yeah. You see how his face lit up? Finally, you heard something that resonates, right? Finally, at least, you see, it took me a long time to get into that space, but I did it. I had to remember when I was 12 years old, sitting in a classroom at 7:43 in the morning, voluntarily, what that felt like. Wow, amazing. So, right, you know that yawn? What's that? The yawn is like, you don't even,
The yawn is saying, I'm tired, get it over with.
Yes. I'm not even giving you the dignity of arguing with you. It's just irrelevant. Mele, if a person is getting angry, at least he's getting angry at you. I'm not angry at you. I'm just yawning. You're not saying anything. You're not provoking me. You're not intriguing me. So, why? Because I'm not in his world. And then sometimes you start describing his world and everybody starts smiling. Against their own will. They don't even want to. But whenever you hear somebody describing your own world, right? It becomes a different situation. I know sometimes I'll give a shir. Some of you know this. I'll speak and speak and speak. You're yawning, you're not yawning. And then I say, let's give an example from marriage. And suddenly, I give the example, and there's 20 new people who just had Chiyas HaMeis. And why? Because it happened last night in the kitchen, right? Last night it happened. Didn't happen a year ago. It happened last night. Or she may be texting as I'm talking, what's happening right now. They say there was once an AT&T salesman who came to a particular house, with his new concoction, and he rings the bell, and the guy comes out, and the AT&T salesman says, I came here, I have this wonderful service, but I have to speak to the master of the home. Who is the master of the home? The guy says, you came on the right time, wait up 5 minutes, because that question is being decided right now in the kitchen. In 5 minutes, I'll be able to answer it to you. What's the issue? The issue is, resonates. It resonates, it's part of my world. Okay, now there's part of my world intellectually, there's part of my world emotionally. That's already different pchinas, that's already different madregas. How much part of my world is it? Am I really going down to the person's emotional level or intellectual level? Okay, that's all different madregas in that itself. But let's understand the nekuda here. So that's all in the teacher's preparations. There's a state where everything is one, and then there's differentiation. Now, so there's klal and prat in the teacher. There's the teacher being in his own mode, and then there's the teacher identifying the student within himself and making already a picture of that student in his own mind, understanding his mindset, understanding his kalim, and communicating it on that level. And as he says, mamash has to fit the mold of the student. Now there is communication itself. Here again you have 2 stages. So if you realize he discusses really 4 stages, 2 in the Rav, Shtayim Shein Arba. Shtayim Shein Arba. 2 in the Rav and 2 in the student. In the student himself, there's stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 1 in the student, he hasn't figured it out yet. Because he hasn't figured it out yet, all he has to do is focus, focus, focus. You can't think about yourself. All you could think is about the ideas. Where is your mind? Your mind is literally submerged in the idea. All you could feel, if somebody would be able to give a physical illustration of it, is the Rav's ideas are enveloping my entire brain. The brain is not even sticking out. My entire brain is, so to speak, bottled, it's submerged, it's in a mamish in a mikveh. There's nothing else. There's just trying to figure out the idea. Why? Because I haven't yet grasped it. It's still more nebulous. I'm getting it, but I didn't get it. I'm getting it. And in order to get it, I have to be completely in it. And what do I have right now? I have now the thrust, the mahalach, the perspective, the klal. It's not yet, it's like the blueprint of a building relative to the building itself. In the blueprint you have the whole building, but what do you have? You have 10 lines. You have 10 lines, that's right. And then you have the building itself, you don't have 10 lines anymore. You have millions and millions of details. So there is the final product after the shir, and not after the shir. A day later, a week later, the Talmud sat down, reviewed his notes, made chazara, thought about it 20 times. I get it. I get it. What happens now? The seichel is inside of him. He becomes the container. In the beginning, the seichel of the Rav contains him. It carries him. He has to allow himself to be carried by the idea. At a later stage, he becomes the container, the keli, where the idea fits in, because it's absorbed in him, became part of him.
And he gets it as a klal, the way it once was in the Rebbe, as a klal also? Or he gets it within him only as pratim?
That's a later stage. At this point, it's only pratim. At this point, it's only pratim because it was suited to his capacity. But even when it was suited to his capacity, you don't get it like this, because the Rav is challenging him. He's not giving him information from a cereal box, or the sports section of the newspaper. He's challenging him on his capacity. So therefore, in the beginning, what he gets is a klal. What's a klal? It's like it's like when somebody's telling you something very new and very deep, like you're hanging on to every word, you're starting to get it, you see where the man is going, you get a general idea, you can't afford to get into details and division. Right now it's collective, later later you have to get it into pratim. You have to get into pratim.
The jigsaw was the first to make it.
Yes.
And one piece here and the whole
Yes. Huh? First klal. If he starts, I'll tell you, interessant. When I was a bachirol, so I had the privilege for a few years to be one of the people who memorized and transcribed the talks of the Lubavitcher Rebbe on Shabbos and Yom Tov. And it was a very, very challenging task. There was, of course, no tape recorder. And the Rebbe would not speak for 5 minutes. This wasn't a tish with a vertel. He could speak for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. And not with many interruptions. I mean, there was a niggin here, a niggin there for a few minutes, but he would go on. And the discussions were not superficial discussions. They were extremely, extremely profound. And the Rebbe wasn't a storyteller or a joke teller. So if it was an hour talk, it was an hour talk. It was meat and potato, and he also gleaned from the whole mosaic of Torah. So you would have halacha and nigla and Kabbalah and Rambam and Rashi and Chassidus and current events and issues going on in Israel and issues going on with the Jewish community, abstract issues and practical issues, avoida and haskalah, sugis and shasen and poiskim and in nigla and chkiris. It was very, very, very intense. And there were no Mari Mekaymas before to prepare, a shir you could prepare before. It was all like it came out. And it was one talk after another talk after another talk after another talk. So it was a very, very, very challenging task. Till today, Mitzvah Shabbos, I get, when Shabbos ends, my body still responds to the pressure of those days. Yeah. I didn't want to use that word, but mervenik, yeah. So it all had to be, literally all had to be memorized. All had to be memorized. And the Rebbe sometimes spoke very brief, like he would say a word, next, boom, boom, boom. It wasn't always, he said, sometimes he elaborated, but often. I remember once, I had a lesson in memory. The Rebbe was talking, and he asked a question, a very strong question, and he gave a beautiful, beautiful answer, magnificent answer. And as he gave the answer, I had to stop and tell myself, this is gewaldic. Like I was complimenting him in my mind. When you say, this is excellent. People always, this is great. A lot of people is, I'm going to use this, but it wasn't that. But it was like, this is great, this is great. And I was telling myself why it's great. Just in my mind, I was allowing myself the pleasure of understanding it and analyzing it. And what happened is that talk I could not retain. I lost it. Why did I lose it? Because I was focused on my experience of it, not on the words being said. And then I learned, my brother taught this to me, he used to do it, and others, that in order to retain it, the first principle is, it's a little counterintuitive, is when you're listening, you cannot be present. There's nothing that exists outside of the ideas that are being communicated. Not even your understanding of it. Because the moment you come in and you're understanding it, you're going to lose it. What has to exist is nothing but the experience, the words themselves. In that case, the Rebbe is talking, there's nothing else. I don't understand, I don't hear, I don't retain, I know nothing. I'm just glued. Literally, you're glued. You can't even be there. Only then can you be there. Why? Because since these are very new ideas and challenging ideas and intriguing ideas, the first thing that has to happen to the Talmud is he completely cannot be present. If he is, what happens is the ideas automatically will not stay with him because they are conforming. He's imposing his experience. I was imposing my excitement and experience on it. And as a result of that, ultimately I couldn't retain it. When he's talking, there's nothing, just the words. But you can't remain that way. If it remains that way, then there's nothing. And unfortunately, the experience is not going to continue. At some point, you have to memorize it, you have to write it down, you have to teach it, you have to communicate it. But that's only stage B. After everything, now you're like, you come out, and now let me introduce myself into the process, let me internalize the ideas. So stage B to stage A, the Talmud is not existing. The whole brain and mind of the student is inside the Seichel Harav, enveloped from every tzad, literally like a mikveh. If there's one strand of hair sticking out, it's puzzle. It's not going to work. You have to be completely contained in it. There's nothing outside of it. In other words, you're not present. You are flat. You are completely open. There's no intellectual ego. So you allow yourself to contain it. Stage B, now you have to internalize it. Ultimately, you're not remaining flat for your whole life. You have a mind, you have a brain, and you have to make it part. So now you have to go back and start going into the words. In that itself, there's many stages. Analyzing it, dissecting it. This is to go into the oimek. You have to be zich mizboinen. What happens at the end? At the end, the ideas are now in you. You contain them rather than they contain you. And now there's a lot of division. There's a structure, there's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end, there's a question, there's an answer, there's a question on the answer, there's an answer on the question, there's a proof, there's a rejection, there's elaboration, there's another proof, there's an illustration, etc., etc. There's the basement, there are the foundations, there's the basement, there's the first floor, there's the second floor, there's the attic, right? It's all, that's what Seichel is. Seichel is basically a mansion of ideas. That's stage B in the Talmud himself. As we shall see, this is his mashal for the two stages of communication, kavayachol, from the ultimate teacher to the ultimate student, from Hashem to the world, basically called Igulim and Yosher.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.